Hello, today I'm starting by adding water to the paper to give a transition between the sky and the areas below. I'm going to use French ultramarine that's got slight green tint to it, make up a big puddle, then add some cobalt turquoise to it just to give it a lift. Make sure that it's lighter and warmer than the sea. I'll start from the top. It doesn't matter if it skips across the page. This is Archie's rag paper and it can skip over the tooth, but it all adds to the atmosphere. I don't want too much of a busy sky because I've got the surf to go in. So just laying the paint down. I'm going to drop in some Naples yellow, and anything that's warm in the sky will make the white surf look brighter. So just drop it in and then get clear water and move it around. And just give a few little highlights to make sure there's no really hard edges. So I've got to let that dry. While it's drying, I can put in the sand. So I'm using Naples yellow to start with, quite strong. And I'm going to alternate it with a bit of yellow ochre. The water pulls the sand very flat when it goes out. But there's always areas with a puddle. If you haven't got Naples yellow, you could do this with yellow ochre, have the same effect. But the beach is a foil for the area of surf and the little fisherman's chapel on the hillside. And at a certain point, the water goes purple. So I'm just dropping some in. It's just the way the light's picking up water. And that again will make the surf look more vibrant. The next stage is to put the chapel in and some of the rocks that are prominent. So I've just mixed a grey with Naples yellow. All the colours are in the description. And it's got lots of shadow on it, but in this case I'm starting with just the light colours and the rocks going up the grass slope. Then I can add the darks when it's dry. Then the grass ends abruptly, probably where it gets licked with salt water when the tide comes in. So I'm mixing up burnt sienna and indigo to make a dark colour, which I was just going to slip in underneath the line of the grass that I've sketched earlier. And then go back while it's still wet, drop some more paint in just to make it a bit stronger. And then as the rocks come down further, they're not in such a recess and they're getting a bit of sun, so they're slightly lighter. So I'm going to change to yellow ochre Just put that in a very watery manner. It's not strong paint, just to cover the white paper. And some of the rocks are dark because they've got a black lichen growing on them, and others are dark because they're very wet. So to cover the white paper and then go back and define rocks is a good thing to do. So white paper will just spoil the effect. The lightest part of the picture is the white surf. So now I can put some grass in. I'm starting with sap green, and then I'm going to add yellow ochre to it. I'm adding yellow ochre because I've already got that elsewhere, so it'll give continuity. I'm just going to clean the brush off and move the paint that I've already got. It's not a lawn, it is a headland. It doesn't matter if it goes down onto the area of rock slightly. Just quite thin over here. There are some more rocks to add. I just want to identify the headland. I'm just going to add a little bit more in places just to make it a little bit more uneven and rugged. And I've got some reflections of the rocks and the hillside on the beach, which are quite a interesting colour. So I'm going to use burnt sienna and a little bit of grey. Just make a dark colour, and then I want to warm it up a bit because it is on sand. So adding yellow ochre just to make a rich colour, and the water is leaving a pattern on the beach. That will all help to hold the picture together, and the lights attract you to the darks and vice versa. And then there's a few trails. The beach looks level, but it's not always level. I'm going to take that all the way to the edge and go in while it's still wet with some more of the same colour. Just lay it on top to make it darker. There are some black lines to go in this, but I can't do that until it's dry. I'm just going to tidy up the edges with the wet brush. And it's already running into some of the rocks, which isn't a problem. I think moving forward, I've got light blue lines where the water is on the sand and it's just giving a little reflection, but it's not just French ultramarine, it's a little bit purpley. So I'm adding some more of my Windsor violet. Any purple will do. What you're doing is just changing the tone of the blue. And again, just dropping it in. You don't have to do too much, but it just makes it look more authentic as wet sand. Just keep it coming. Some of it is in quite big areas. So I'll just water the paint down a little bit, just give a suggestion of it. And some of the blue goes all the way down to the surf line, so I'm just going to mix another batch that will be slightly different. Water it down a lot because it's further away, so you're not looking at it in quite the same light. And there's just a hint of blue going down to the surf line. Less is more with this sort of thing. And then I've already got the purple I put in earlier, so I'll just go over that slightly. More water. Just blend everything together. So nothing actually stands out, it's just all in harmony. Then along the surf line, there's sand coming in with the surf. So I'm just going to go along with the yellow ochre and just drop some in, and that will make the surf look a brighter white. And it's less obvious the further it goes back, so I'm not recharging the brush, I'm just using what's on the brush. And then here it lips forward a little. So now I can move back to more rocks that I want to put in before I put anything else in. So I'm going to mix burnt sienna and indigo. I'll make something that's really dark. Now I'm changing to the smallest brush I can find. I'm just going to use the tip of the brush. It's not heavily loaded, but I've got one or two rocks here that are pointed and they will show up quite well against the white surf. But they're dark rocks, so you don't want black or anything, they're just a dark browny colour. And then just now I've got the shape, just drop some paint in there. Clean the brush off and just move some of it forward. And then picking up the yellow ochre, moving the paint on the paper. Now, there's no drawing there really, it's just moving paint. Well, I can't come forward anymore because it's still a bit damp, but I can do the horizon, which is a very dark turquoisey blue. So I'm going to start with cobalt turquoise and a little bit of viridian, and then finally some French ultramarine, and stir them all together, and then just add it to the horizon. And then changing to just French ultramarine and bringing it forward a little bit, and it'll go wet into wet. By the rocks it changes completely to turquoise. It's just the way that the sand's in the water and the way it's catching the light. So just cleaning the brush off a little bit and putting in the turquoise I've got to leave room for surf. So staying to the left-hand side of the picture, which hasn't got so much surf, and it's breaking quite happily by the rocks. So I'm now changing colour slightly, adding a little bit more Viridian. And going in a more controlled manner. That I've got a line of green and white. And that paint just disappears into the surf. But it keeps a fairly straight line coming out. And then the waves are coming in and they're licking into the shore. Just a lick of paint at a slight angle. But they're a bit lost, so I'm just going to get some water and just wet one side of the line. And then coming forward, I've got more of the purpley blue, but this time it's more blue than purple, so just changing the colour again. And that's where it's landing on the beach. So there's a gap of white. Watering it down a bit more. Then I can add detail to the white surf if I need to, but I might not need to. So this scale is really just showing more white than anything else. I'm now going to define the little chapel a bit more. Just putting on a little bit of darker grey. And then the sun is catching one side of it, so I'm going to use some yellow ochre. Just do the front face of it. And there's some darker rocks going down the edge. They're in more shadow. So I'm just going to put those in. And then merge the colours together. Now the next stage is to put the rocks in at sea level. And they're easily divided into 2 or 3 sections, depending on how wet and dry they are. So I'm going to use yellow ochre and just go in at the top. It shows it's a bright day and the rocks are reflecting the light. Just do little squiggles, nothing more. And then the rocks at the bottom have got some black lichen on, and they're darker because they're wet more often. So I'm mixing indigo and burnt sienna together. Just mixing a colour that's more subdued, and then following the shape and form of the rocks, letting it bleed one into the other. Just putting in a darker line all the way across, then going back, just dropping in the same paint but slightly darker every now and again. And if it's bled up too high, as this is rag paper, takes a while to dry, just take it back with your finger. And then at the bottom, beyond the black lichen that grows at the seaside, they've got more barnacles and things on, so there's a slightly different colour. I'm barnacles, I usually just tint the brown paint with a little bit of Naples yellow. As barnacles are usually the colour of milky coffee, and they do affect the colour of the rock. Just put that in, just lipping it up to the black line. Again, it doesn't matter if it bleeds too much. Then at the surf line, there's flying surf. So what I've got to do is do the dark behind it. So I'm going to change to a smaller brush and a darker colour and just paint in the negative. It's just splashing up. Onto the rocks. And get a clean brush and just lose some of the top edge. So it's going to infinity. And the same a little bit further out to sea, just to show the splashes. Now, whilst that's drying, I can put a little bit more detail on the hillside. You have to build these things up in layers. Just follow the line of the cliff, which has got quite a few boulders on, and then take the brush back sideways. And there are rocks going up, so what I'm going to do is leave a gap and go from the other side. Just get it to loosely meet in the middle. And when it's dry, I can add a few rocks. I'm just going to get the brush and just lift a few areas of paint here, as it is a headland and it's not even. So if you just lift a few, make sure there's no hard edges, it'll give a more natural look. Now while I'm waiting for that to dry, I can do the stripes on the beach. So I'm going to pick a slightly smaller brush with a good point, and they are reflections of the rocks, and this is all going horizontally, but the reflections of the rocks are coming forward. I'm just going to mix the indigo and burnt sienna again. Just put a few lines in, and then I'll go back and thicken some of them, but I just want to put them in first. So I'll clean the brush off and just move the paint. And there's also reflections of the light coloured areas of the headland. So I'm just using yellow ochre, just dropping it in between. And then I'll move it when I've got it all in. If you start moving it all at the beginning, then it's too neat. These are just random reflections where the sun's catching it at that particular moment. Clean the brush off, go in again. And then a tiny bit of weak yellow ochre just to balance up the colours. Then I'm going to get a bigger brush. I'm going to use a flat brush on this occasion because I've got one. Just add a little bit of Naples yellow to the higher point of the beach. Just make the foreground a little bit bolder. As this is rag paper, it will soak in a little bit. If you're using mould made paper, just have the paint a little bit weaker. Just letting the paint down slightly, coming forward around the blue. Make sure there's no hard edges. So I'm going to balance it up by putting a little bit more on the surf line. And whilst I'm waiting for that to dry, I can do the slate roof on top of the chapel, which might not be much, but it just gives it a little bit more shape and form. And make the wall a little bit darker now. I haven't lost the balance of the picture. You're still looking towards the surf, but I do need to put a little bit more detail on the rocks when they're dry. I've just put a little bit more detail on the rocks to make them a little bit bolder, and anything darker there makes the white surf look brighter. And I hope you've enjoyed watching this video, and if you're looking for the chapel, it's at St.Ives. Thank you for watching.